Welcome to Running for Real, a global community with a shared love and curiosity for running. Together we reconnect with the reasons why we love to run and discover ways it helps us become better people. Whether it's the quiet moments of a morning run while the rest of the world still sleeps, or befriending the strangers next to you at the start line of a race, we are here to connect with others who see running as the common thread that weaves our lives together. Come join me, Tina Muir, as I talk with people from all walks of life, united by a love of running. Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 321 of the Running for Real podcast. Thank you so much for being here. And today I'm excited to welcome Rachel Gersten to the show. Before we get to telling you about Rachel, I just want to let you know that some exciting things are going on over at our Patreon. So I have had a Patreon for many years. You can find it at patreon.com/running for running for real. I've had it for many years. I haven't done the best job of staying in touch, but now I have recently been shown the new features, the new things about Patreon. We have come up with some really exciting bonuses and things we're going to be offering to you on Patreon. And it's going to be exclusively for people on Patreon. These are things that are really unique and powerful, and especially if you are a Together Run runner. You will appreciate these and be excited for these. Those of you who have been asking me for long runs and workouts, hint, hint, that is going to be one thing you can take advantage of. So you can go check out patreon.com/running for real. However, I know you are currently listening to this to listen to this. So I will be talking about Patreon in more detail later in the episode. And there will also be links in the show notes. So whenever you feel ready, you can go check them out. I encourage you to sign up as soon as you can, because those bonuses are going to be well worth the initial joining energy it takes to do that, because I get it. All that stuff takes energy, but it'll be worth it, I promise. All right, so let's get on with our episode today. Today, I am excited to welcome New York City therapist, licensed professional clinical counselor. Wow, that is a mouthful to say. Rachel Gersten. Rachel is the co-founder of Viva Mental Health, and we're going to hear a little bit about what Viva Mental Health is later in the episode. She's also a runner. She is has a 5-time black belt in martial arts. And today we wanted to focus on burnout. There is I know a lot of us are feeling this just heavy sense of too much to do, don't have the motivation. Race numbers are down. Why is that? How could that possibly be affecting our running, our daily lives, and how everything else is just really coming on top of us? And if you are someone who struggles to motivate yourself, who feels lazy, who feels like everyone else has discipline and you don't, this is the episode for you. We also go on to talk about being type A kind of personalities, about overcoming chronic illness. So there's a lot of things working through chronic illness. There's a lot of things we talk about, but the theme throughout the whole episode is burnout. So I really think this is going to be an important one for us all to listen to. And with that, let's get to meeting Rachel. Hi friends, just want to take a moment to let you know about what we are doing at Patreon. We are making something new, something exciting. We're building community for you. The one thing that I wanted to do initially with these Together runs was that I wanted us to build a sense of community. I made them because we felt so disconnected. We had our phones, but all we were seeing was perfection. All we were seeing was parts of people's lives that just seemed so good. And I wanted to find a way where we could feel like we were really there together. So even though we can't run with each other in person, we can't often meet up, this is a way to bring us together. And that was the main reason of why I created Together Runs, which goes with the original theme of Running for Real, which was to not have people feel alone. So that is why I created these. And I'm continuing to create these, keeping the original parts of the nature check-in, the body scan, the senses check-in, the how are you really, and the conversational piece. But I'm excited to tell you that now we are stepping them up. And over on Patreon, you can go join me for some travel Together runs. So we are going to go to Chicago, to San Francisco, to Lake Tahoe, to New York, and we are going to go explore those areas together. It's really going to feel like you are with me exploring. We're keeping those core elements, but we're making something exciting. That is one level. If you want to step up to the next level, there will be live Q&As with you and I. You will have the opportunity to ask upcoming guests, your question, and plenty of time to think of those questions, including a big guest we have coming up very soon. There will also be additional benefits that you can go find out over there, including how to get yourself a training plan that can change your life. It doesn't require certain paces. It doesn't require you to be a certain fitness. It isn't a training plan that's a one and done. This can be used over and over and over again because it's all effort-based and it is all based on where you are at now. That is one place you can go get that. You can join in with our community. We can talk about the answers to the questions in those together runs. And I really am loving seeing those of you over there. So head on over to patreon.com/runningforreal. That's patreon.com/running4real with the number 4. That's running for real with the number 4. There's also links all over the show notes, wherever you are listening to this. So come join us on Patreon. It is something really exciting. Especially if you are feeling disconnected, especially if you are feeling lonely, this is the place to go. I can't wait to see you there. Rachel, thank you so much for joining me today on the Running for Real podcast. I am excited that you are here.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. And I want to thank our you work alongside her. I work alongside her. I don't know what we would call that. Colleague, I suppose. Yes. Maria Vargas. For
I don't know what the right word would be either, but
yeah, I think colleague fits it the best. Colleague, friend, Maria Vargas for connecting us and making this happen, because you and I have talked a few times in the past. You've also supported with something I have created in the past. You also were one of the people to offer to help people when it was early in the pandemic and there was kind of a bit of a crisis going on. You were great in supporting the community there. So thank you for that. But today we're going to talk a little bit about you and your journey and what you're doing. You are a New York City therapist. You are the co-founder of Viva Mental Health. You are a runner. You have a 5-time black belt. What does 5-time black belt mean?
So there's different levels. So this is actually, people ask this a lot, is that they're just like, did you just do it 5 times? I'm like, kind of. Very similarly to, kind of other, like I compare it to school. Okay. So it's literally actually named after grade. So there's like a 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th, et cetera, black belt. So It's essentially the 5th level. So
why do they call it time instead of like, why 5-time instead of like 5th level or something?
That's a great question.
Is that as high as it goes? 5?
You can do both. Oh, no. You could have like a million different.
Okay.
Not really that many, but I'm not even going to guess the number because I don't remember. It's been a while. But either way,
you have a black belt 5 times, which is...
there's 5 black belts lying around somewhere in sports.
Are these literal black belts?
Yeah, it's literally, yes. It's not like, people often ask too, is it like the kind of belt like you wear on your pants? I'm like, I guess you could, but no.
It's like the tie, right?
Yeah, it's like literally what you see in like karate movies.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm kind of envisioning this as almost like, how when you do races and you get to a point where you're like, okay, I do not need another 5K medal. So you could get to that point with the black belts of where you're like, this is my black belt room where.
Yeah, it's funny because like you only wear, if you're actively training, your most recent one. So the other ones just like, hang out like your past medals. Although now that I'm thinking of it, it would be cool if like, your most recent marathon, you wore that medal while running, but I don't know how that would ever be comfortable. So maybe that's not a good idea.
No. I can't see that either. Although my mind is jumping to the sustainability piece now of like, I wonder how in the future that will become a conversation of what you can do with all those black belts. Medals is a whole nother thing that don't even get me started on. But like black belts, what could they be made into in the future? Like stitching them together.
Right. Yeah, like can you repurpose them? Yeah, I feel the same way about race t-shirts where I don't want them, but I know they make them very few races give you the option to like opt out of the shirt. So they're making them anyway. I'm like, so I guess I'm taking it, but I don't want to. Yep. So yes, I feel the same way where I always think about that of like, could this be repurposed into something? Could we stop just making all these things? But one day, hopefully.
Yeah. Yes, that's the, probably like 80% of my thoughts are swirling around thinking about those things. So I hear you there. Okay, I want to get us back on track. Want to talk about a few things today, kind of more difficult topics to talk about, but things that are very important. I wanted to primarily, as I spoke to you, make this, at least the first part of this episode, focused on burnout. Now, we have covered burnout on the podcast in a few different ways. But one thing I've not covered yet, and speaking with race directors that I know, and also seeing that this year's Boston, everyone who applied got in because the numbers are down. Is there some way that psychologically this is connecting, that like people are feeling stressed in other elements of their life and don't have the maybe capacity to want to enter a race? Or like, what is, from what you see, the reason, let's like kind of speculate here, of why race entries could be down, why maybe people aren't in a state where they can push right now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think there's probably, and obviously everyone is going to be different in their particular reason, but I think there's probably a few things going on. One, we've all been through a lot in the last, depending on when you start counting, anywhere from 3 to 6, almost 10 years. The world's been a lot. And so I think just individually, it's pretty hard for people to maybe want to take on more effort when they're already kind of feeling like a big weight just from the general state of the world. You know, we watch the news and sometimes it feels very much like it's happening outside of us or our immediate world, which is still, you know, pretty heavy to kind of carry that knowledge around of what's going on around us. But also all those news stories impact people individually. So you could give a whole list of examples from, you know, people who live in places where their reproductive rights are being taken away and they have to consider that in their daily lives, to the impact of COVID, to financial ramifications, you know, so that in and of itself, and then is a lot. And then you take, okay, you know, race in particular, like Boston is a good example because you have to qualify to get in. A lot of people, that means that they're racing their fastest marathon time ever. That can just feel like a lot. Their bodies just might not be able to give that much effort and push that hard, given everything else that's going on that maybe wasn't true, you know, 4 years ago. So I think that's definitely like the simplest answer, is just people are burnt out and tired, and maybe their life circumstances have changed to the point that they don't have the financial resources or the free time to dedicate all of that to such a big, lofty goal. I think also, you know, what we've been through in a very changing world, and I know that's cliche, but the world has changed. People's priorities might just be shifting. You hear from a lot of people, or I've heard from a lot of people, that it really, the pandemic really reshifted how people view what's important to them. You know, a lot of people slowed down because they were forced to, at least initially. A lot of people didn't race for a year plus because they couldn't. And then they're like, wow, I don't actually need to spend all this money, or I just like running for fun. I don't need to chase personal records all the time. That's not fulfilling to me anymore. And so it's this idea that the world changed kind of more generally. And so as a result, I think you would expect to see people's perspective on things like races or other things they used to do in their day-to-day life shift as well.
Yeah, it's something I've been thinking about a lot. And I'm glad you mentioned the last, like, whenever you said 3 to 6 to 10 years, because I'd kind of almost forgotten a lot of the, you know, the trauma or the stress that we've been going through for quite a while now. And while this, you know, we've continued to become more and more polarized and everything feels very tense and on edge. And it's interesting because I'd always in the past had this conversation around running, where we have these comfortable, cushy lives where we live in our, you know, for most people listening, you have air conditioning in the summer, you have heat in the winter, you have everything you need to feel that like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that bottom section to be covered. However, I have thought over the recent years about we're not really living in a comfortable state, but before it was very much like a physical, and now it's more of a mental, like you said about the news or said about things going on. And while we can disconnect ourselves and say, I just can't think about what's going on in Ukraine or whatever, because I just don't have the mental space for it. You're still aware that with every decision you're making, you have this privilege and this like life that so many others around the world don't have. So let's talk about that a little bit more in terms of, maybe running was always something to push outside of your comfort zone. And now kind of we're not living in a state of our comfort zone anyway, but it's in a different way, or at least that's how I see it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think regardless of where anyone personally stands on COVID currently, when this started, a lot of what I heard was that it really shook people up, because it was this idea that your plans didn't matter. Mm-hmm. We always kind of knew that in the back of our head, that you hear stories of people who have horrible things happen to them, or life just completely throws a curveball at you. But for the most part, most of us on a day-to-day basis could plan on, if we said we wanted to do something 3 months from the time we said it, we could do it. We could plan a vacation. We could book concert tickets. We could make a dinner reservation. And then all of a sudden we lived in this reality where it was like, actually, that's not true anymore. Your plans don't matter at all. Anything can happen, and that's it. Like, there's nothing you can do. That was, and still is for some people, this very jarring reality that when it's just in your face like that, it's so much harder to ignore and push aside to move along with your daily life. And so, I think that does create a level of discomfort or uneasiness that maybe people didn't feel before March of 2020. Mm-hmm. And so, you kind of apply that to like the Boston Marathon example again, where that's a huge undertaking of time, both to qualify and then to eventually race. And maybe it's a little harder for people to wrap their head around, hey, this thing I plan to do in like a year to 2 years is actually going to happen, and all of my effort won't be for naught. That's pretty hard. I think that's happening with people with even just simple things like vacation bookings. I've heard anecdotally that people aren't booking things 6 months out anymore, because this is just where we are. And we have a very recent reminder of when it actually doesn't matter what you plan. The world is going to throw something else at you, coupled with there's all this other like uneasy news stuff happening in so many different areas. And you're right. It does create a just general kind of simmering discomfort, which you then can relate to running and say, maybe you need running just to feel like a release and a good time, not something that you have to stress about or feel pressure over, which is basically the opposite of like trying to run your fastest time for a lot of people.
Yes. Okay. So then with that, I have heard, so personally, since I've tried and signed up for 3 and intended to do a 4th. But again, with what we were just saying, didn't sign up for the 4th because I didn't want my heart to be crushed, and it did get crushed. It did not happen anyway. So like, I feel like that one, at least I managed to avoid the most of the pain of it. But so I signed up for 3 races. All 3 of those didn't go through because of sickness related to my kids. However, I am actually okay with that. And now I feel like for me, I've got to a point where I'm like, you know what? Just not meant to be right now. I'm doing New York as a guide for a visually impaired runner, but like that I can commit myself to, but I just can't. I just don't have it in me right now to sign up for a race and really train for it. But I've heard a lot from other people about who have said to me, like, I can't motivate myself. I feel lazy. I feel like everyone has discipline and I don't. Is the issue discipline in your opinion?
Not usually. I think self-discipline is definitely a thing, and I think it's important. It's when you know that you need to go do the thing even when you don't want to do the thing. And that obviously applies to getting out for a run. That applies to, bill paying or like getting to the dentist, thinking about like life tasks that are not pleasant, but we know we need to do them, right? That's where that comes into play, right? Turning off the TV show you're watching to like sit down and do an hour of solid uninterrupted work, even if you don't want to, or, it feels overwhelming. That I think only goes so far because we only do things that benefit us. It might not be beneficial in the long term. It might not be, the best decision for us, but in the moment there's some benefit. If there was no benefit, we wouldn't do it. And I think that is important to remember to people so people can cut themselves some slack. Lazy people, I don't know. I don't want to say like it never exists, but I think it's very rare because again, it goes back to there always being a reason. So you take something like running for somebody who loves running and previously trained for all kinds of races and trained hard and loved getting out there at 5 o'clock in the morning. And then suddenly they don't want to. I don't know that person just suddenly became lazy. I feel like there's probably something else happening, and it could be personal events. It could be world events. It could be a combination of both. But I think we very quickly jump to, oh, I just don't have any discipline, or, oh, I'm just lazy, or, I can't do this. When in reality, we're human and we don't operate in a bubble. And so it's probably something going on that's a reason if all of a sudden you don't want to or find it harder to do this thing you previously loved and really wanted to do.
So in that situation, is the answer to sign up for a race because that maybe is what always worked in the past, to sign up for a race to motivate yourself? Or is the answer actually the opposite of let's not sign up for anything, go out. If you go out and you do 10 minutes, come back. Like it really doesn't matter. What would you say?
Yeah, all of the above, none of the above. I think the question is, I'm very big on finding your why. Like, why are you running? And maybe it is to break a particular time and that goal is really relevant to you. And if it is, great. Like, then yeah, sign up for a race and that'll probably motivate you. But if you're honest with yourself and you're like, yeah, I don't care about a time on the clock. Maybe it's just for fun. Maybe you just want to go out when the weather is nice and it's a break. So do that and see what happens. You can also always run a race for fun. If you have one on the calendar and you're like, I can't manage to train. Okay. So go out and just have a fun day. Run as fast as you feel that day. Enjoy the scenery and just have a good time.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, and anything in between too, sometimes you might just need a break. If every day you're like, I don't want to go or I don't want to be here, then you should listen to that after a while and try to figure out what's going on. But forcing yourself to do it, even if like every fiber of your being is screaming no, you're just kind of pushing yourself deeper into a hole. Something I experienced recently, I'm also running the New York City Marathon. And I told my coach not that long ago, hey, I need to stop with the time on the clock. Like there's no goal. I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna run whatever pace feels good. And if it feels faster, it's great. If not, oh well. And whatever happens on race day is what happens, because I just need this to feel joyful. And it's worked. Much better last couple of weeks than the previous weeks before, because that's what I mentally needed. And some people might need to push harder and need a goal, and some people might need a total break. And it's just checking in with yourself to ask, like, what's your why and why do you want to do this and what do you need? Because like you said, it doesn't matter. Your running in particular only actually matters to you. It's supposed to be fun, right? If it's not fun, you need to either make it fun or take a break. Because it actually doesn't matter. Like it matters and it doesn't matter because it's important to you. And so it matters. But in the general scheme of life, like it actually makes no difference. So if you're not enjoying it and it's not what you need, like why do it?
Thank you to Athletic Greens for sponsoring this episode of the Running For Real podcast. Now, you've heard me talking about Athletic Greens for years now. It allows you to say goodbye to piles of pills and countless powders. One daily serving of AG1 delivers this potent blend of 9 health products, a multivitamin, minerals, probiotics, adaptogens, and more. It's the comprehensive foundational nutrition you need with the convenience for your life demands. Now, that applies to me in a way I cannot even describe. With 2 young kids, I know I should be getting 27 different fruits and vegetables in a day, but honestly, some days I'm lucky if I can get 1 or 2 at dinner. And it is difficult for me to take care of myself with just this hectic life that I live. So while I want to make these green juices every morning, with a juicer machine, with the kale and the ginger and the lemon and all those other things, I just don't have the time for it. I can barely get to stuff something down my throat to eat. And I love that I can wake up before the girls wake up, drink down my 1 scoop of athletic greens with ice cold water, drink it down, know that I've got 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole food source ingredients to start my day, so that even if that day ends up being hectic and running around all over the place, I know I've got that in. It tastes good. It's almost a slight pineapple-y taste. I love drinking it before I run. I drink it and go immediately out the door. It's going to help with your gut health. It's going to support your immunity. It's going to boost your energy and help with the recovery. What more can you ask for with 1 scoop? So you can go to athleticgreens.com/Tina. You will get 5 free travel packs and a 1-year free supply of vitamin D3 and K2. Now, as we head into the winter months, that is when we need that vitamin D, and it works well with the K3 as well to absorb better. We need those to protect us from all the nasty sicknesses that are coming around. So be sure to go to athleticgreens.com/Tina to go check out my special offer and stop stressing about not getting those fruits and vegetables in. This is going to take care of you. If you don't have that strong why connected to doing a race, but that's always been what you have used to, it's just always the way you've known running, or at least the way you've known running for many, many years. Is there a point where for some runners it might almost become counterintuitive, not even counterintuitive, but like almost like defense mode resistant, into where you might say, okay, well, I need to motivate myself. This race is coming. So let me give an example of this. So before I stopped running in 2017, I was feeling very unmotivated. I just ran a PR, was feeling very unmotivated as I came back to running. I thought, okay, well, I just need to sign up for a race. So I thought, right, I need a really good motivating race. Signed up for the Gold Coast Marathon in Australia. Flat course, fast, in Australia. You can't get much better than that.
Right.
But that didn't work. So then I signed up to be a pacer for the London Marathon for the elite women doing that. But that didn't work either. And it felt like the harder I tried to knuckle down and like, get on with it, like the worse I felt. And so is there a point for runners listening who maybe have always known what they know is racing, and suddenly they are not finding that it's working, they're really not enjoying those runs, but they find it so hard to do exactly what you just said, call up the coach and say, you know what, I just can't do this right now. What would be your advice to that person?
I think globally, I would look at, why are you holding on to something so hard that you clearly don't want, right? Like if your body is screaming to stop, and I'll share like my kind of epiphany moment where I was like, and we're giving up, we're going to change things, was that I went out to do a workout, and within like the first rep, I was like, man, I just want to be doing anything else but being here right now. Like, I don't want to do this. And that's rare for me. Even when it's hard, I very rarely am I like, I would rather like stand in traffic right now. And that was when I was like, okay, that's a red flag, right? Kind of like when you think of it like almost in like a medical context with injuries, you might have like lingering foot pain, for example. But if you like wake up in the morning and your foot is like black and blue and swollen, you might be like, and we're seeing a doctor now. That's it. That's the last straw. It's kind of thinking of it that way, right? And that goes back to this idea that like, if you're in that place where your body is just screaming at and things are different, right? You've always enjoyed races, and now you're just like, oh my God, I can't even get up from race morning. Like, this feels awful. Why are you holding on so hard to something that you clearly don't want to do or isn't serving you right now? And that might be a bigger, deeper question to explore. Therapy is super helpful for that. But if you can get to a place where you ask yourself that question, you're like, man, I don't really know. don't hold on so hard. The world is different than it was a few years ago. You've probably experienced a lot. Maybe you're different. Maybe you've gone through some personal stuff that doesn't even have anything directly to do with like the global state of the world. And just allow yourself to be in a different place. Like, we are always in different places. And so maybe this is where you are. And I would even say take it day by day, right? It's kind of releasing. And again, this is easier said than done, but releasing those expectations of, if you think you want to run a race, sign up for it. But know if you a week before feel like, oh no, don't go, right? It's kind of just doing what you feel is right, even on like a day-to-day basis. And if you find yourself resisting that, kind of go back to that why. Like, why are you running, right? Maybe your relationship with running is problematic in a certain way. And maybe that's something to explore further. Or maybe it's just as simple as asking yourself that question to get this like, oh, I actually don't know why I'm forcing myself so hard to do this thing I don't want to do. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to just immediately stop running altogether. It might mean maybe you don't feel like running 10 to 15 miles at a time anymore, or right now. Maybe you want to run 5. Maybe that's what feels good. Maybe you want to run 3 days a week instead of 6, right? And kind of just going with this idea of like, what do I need now? And getting back to the place where you want to run, and then seeing where that takes you. And it might lead you back to wanting to do races or, try for a specific time. But it just goes back to this idea of why. If it's not fun and it's not serving a purpose and it's causing you stress and aggravation, like, make it make sense then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. One final thing I want to ask about this is quite often when we talk about burnout, or when someone is feeling this way, the answer that you're given is, well, you're just not taking care of yourself. You need to have a self-care. You need to, up your self-care, and you need to take care of, just give yourself something that will, make you feel better in that moment. But often it's not quite as simple as that. Can you explain a bit more on why that is?
Yeah, I think the go-to for burnout is always, self-care, journal, rest, bubble bath, yoga. I'm trying to think of all the other like very cliche things that sometimes they work. And if that's what does it for you in that moment, like, fantastic. That's exactly what you should do. But I think burnout is actually really complicated. Is the first thing you need to look at is why you're burnt out and what will actually help. I've heard from various clients, and I know I felt this myself recently in the last few years, of that part of the burnout comes from not experiencing joy. Right. That you're kind of going through your day to day, you work, you take care of your responsibilities. And I think this happened a lot during COVID when a lot of things were canceled or closed. There wasn't a lot of joy. And so telling someone in that situation, okay, well, just read a book or journal. It's like, no, what's burning them out is that they're not experiencing that joy or doing things that they really love. And so maybe the answer is to meet up with a friend, or to schedule yourself, buy tickets to something, schedule yourself for something you really enjoy, versus resting. Maybe you're resting too much, and that's part of why you're feeling burnt out, because you don't have anything that's really exciting you. The other piece of it as well is that sometimes burnout doesn't come from anything you're doing. Sometimes burnout comes from the world. So if you're kind of struggling with systemic injustice in its various forms, I don't know how a bubble bath or relaxation helps with that. It doesn't, is the spoiler. It does not. And so telling someone to do that is almost patronizing and self-blaming, in the sense of like, okay, well, you're dealing with all of these world issues and all of these systemic problems. It's like, oh, well, what's wrong with you that you can't make yourself, through self-care, feel better about these issues? You can't fix that, right? If it's something that is a systemic problem, you should be burnt out by that. That's a normal reaction to some of the stuff that's going on in the world. And so the answer to that burnout might be to take more action, right? Maybe it is to get more civically involved. Maybe it's to find a support group. So many things that you could do that actually would require more effort or more action, as opposed to just like, oh, just take care of yourself. There's no right way to take care of yourself, and it doesn't fit into this nice little box. And so part of it, I think, is like really getting down to, before you suggest to yourself or someone else like what they can do for burnout, is really figuring out where that burnout comes from. Yeah. Because it might not even be your fault. And so maybe you can't individually fix it. And that's not to put like this doom and gloom on it of like, oh, well, then you're going to feel burnt out forever. But maybe instead of immediately trying to fix it, some of the relief comes from acceptance of it's not your fault and the world is what it is, and really feeling and working through that rather than just like trying to cover it with like self-care.
Related to that, what would you like to remind people listening about? You mentioned there about accepting it and being able to kind of say that this is affecting me, and especially when it's things that are personally important to you, which in this time of social media and the way that our feeds are like tailored to hit us where I don't want to say where it hurts, but where it affects us emotionally the most. We are in a global society, so we're going to see things of whatever that is for us. But we live in a world that tells us you're supposed to just be happy. I mean, I have always been very honest and open with how I'm feeling, and I really struggle with the like, how are you? Good. How are you? Good. Because that's to me, I never just feel one thing. There's always multiple things, and almost always a negative and a positive at any one moment. So can we talk a little bit about like, in this burnout culture, maybe a part of it is having to have all this going on underneath, but still presenting as like, yeah, hi, how are you? Like kind of almost having to like, be like, and 3, 2, 1, hi, like you kind of have to like pull everything up to like put on a face. What would you say there?
Yeah. In my perfect world, we would all be able to express our very normal human emotions without it being a thing, because it's actually just so ridiculous that we expect this of people, right? World stuff aside, the things that we can go through personally in the course of a day, but then have to like go out onto the street to pick up something from the store. And if you run into someone you have to be like, hello, how are you? So nice to see you. And it's so fake. Like, not just maybe you are excited to see this person, but if you've just had this like devastating personal thing happen to you, it's actually really damaging to have to pretend that you're in a space that you're not. It's not good to say the least. And so in my perfect world, we wouldn't do that, but we don't live there. And so what I would say to people is to remember that sometimes, a lot of the time, when you're feeling sad, anxious, angry, whatever, instead of trying to make that go away, maybe just recognize that you're supposed to feel that way based on what's going on. If you feel sad or feel just defeated or heavy throughout the day because you hear this news story that's just super impactful and really sad, I think the normal reaction is for people to try to like distract themselves. And sometimes that's helpful. But I also think there's a place to just recognize that that's part of being human. And there's so many messages that say we have to get rid of that and we can't acknowledge that. I remember watching footage of the floods in Pakistan and literally seeing this like apartment building that was standing there 1 second and then floating down the water the next. And people are in it. Like you see people from the window. And the rest of the morning, I just couldn't get that out of my head. And I feel like that's a normal reaction to seeing that, to seeing and hearing about human suffering and feeling fearful about the future. When we hear news stories that's like the world is burning, you're going to feel that. And it's not helpful to just immediately make that go away. There is a balance between feeling and living your life and, moving on and pushing forward, but there's a balance. So we have to be on the other side of it too, where we're also just letting ourselves feel what we feel in response to what's going on around us, rather than trying to pretend like we should be immune to everything that's in our environment.
So what would you say to someone? I mean, firstly, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the news and the media. Like, is it damaging for us to be watching? Would you say, I mean, obviously, I know it depends on the person, but is it helpful to view the news sometimes? Because as you said, there's a balance between, there are some people who never pay attention to anything and are only involved in their own little bubble. But that's not really great either, is it? But then you also have people who watch the news for hours on end, and I have to think about how that's impacting their mental health.
Yeah, very similarly to, like you said, to balance. I think it's a balance as well, right? Like I said about kind of burnout, there's some types of burnout where doing nothing is not the answer. It actually perpetuates the burnout potentially.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of the societal issues are similar. If everyone is ignoring them and staying in their bubble, the burnout is actually going to continue because nothing is changing. And in order for things to change, people have to be aware and engaged. And so, yeah, I would never say to everyone, just tune out what you don't like, because then the status quo stays the same. And then all these underlying reasons for burnout are never going to change because we're not changing them as a society.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, the person who has a new Twitter on loop constantly and is always filled with devastating stories, that's probably not great either. So I usually tell people to really curate your sources, both as an informed consumer. So different kind of sources, different types of sources, different perspectives, making sure that your news sources are valid and independent and as unbiased as possible, right? Because that obviously affects how the information is being presented to you. Mm-hmm. Getting it from different sources to make sure that you have kind of a better idea, and that usually limits a lot of the doom scrolling vibes, especially if you're, cognizant of making sure that you're following sources that are not just like focused on clickbait. And at the same time, I think it's being mindful, right? Like, so using the Twitter feed as an example, maybe seeing 40 news sources back to back when you wake up in the morning is too much. Maybe pick your top 5 and that's what you follow, right? And that's it. And at the same time, I think this was really relevant during, crisis situations, but if you're not learning anything new and you're just having the same information repeated over and over again, or you're just seeing the same horrible images over and over again, like that's when it's time to stop. You're not learning anything new. You've informed yourself, and now it's time to do what you're going to do with that information rather than continuing to like re-traumatize yourself.
Yeah.
And it's being aware too of things like, more recently, because 9/11, the commemorative date just happened. Being aware of how it's presented to you as well. It's not helpful. And I get very angry every time I see this, for news stations every year to have footage of the towers falling. Like, we don't need to see that again. Mm-hmm. We understand what happened. It's not healthy for people to watch such destruction. And it's also just very inconsiderate of the people who that was the worst day of their lives.
Yeah.
And so also noting that, right? It's like, if you're hearing about, this happened a lot during the George Floyd protests. We kept seeing the clip, and that's just not necessary. And so there's ways, using that as an example, that you can be informed about like what's going on in that situation without doing it through news sources that are continuously showing a man being murdered, for example. Mm-hmm. And so it's just kind of this way of consuming in a way that feels manageable and also allows you to be aware to then make decisions that is going to help you and others overall, and just like the general state of well-being in society.
Tracksmith is an independent running brand inspired by a deep love of the sport. For years, the brand has elevated running wear using best-in-class materials in timeless silhouettes that perform at the highest level. Now, they're doing the same with footwear. The Elliott Runner was developed to meet the rigorous demands of committed runners, providing the perfect balance of cushioning and responsiveness with classic Tracksmith style. The inspiration for the Elliott Runner started with a feeling many runners experience: the delight in finding a natural surface while out for a run. Logging thousands of miles across New England, the Tracksmith team found those moments on pine needle trails, wood chip paths, and indoor tracks. That's the sensation they wanted to bring to the roads: soft, resilient, responsive, and ready for anything. Step into the Elliott Runner, a Pebax-powered trainer inspired by the pep of New England's natural surfaces. See the Elliott Runner in person at Tracksmith pop-ups at the London and Chicago marathons and their Boston store this fall, before an exclusive opportunity to pre-order on October 24th. For more information, visit tracksmith.com/Tina. That's tracksmith.com/Tina. Thank you so much for that. Yes, I think that's very good point and something I hadn't thought to bring up. So thank you. Okay, so let's talk Viva Mental Health. You co-founded that with Jor-El. I actually forgot to write down his last name. Carabello.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you founded it together. Him being this Zen, deliberate, calming person, you being the, like many of us resonate with, the type A, go. You founded this together, it ended up being this perfect match of working together with, mental health services. Maybe if you want to just tell us a little bit about what you do there and whatever you'd like to share about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were really passionate about building a holistic, inclusive, accessible, and culturally competent therapy practice. I personally have a background in healthcare, both obviously as a therapist, but also as a patient. I manage a chronic illness. I have for over 20 years. So I know the healthcare system and it is bad. So this is kind of our part in making at least what we can do a little bit better in terms of treating clients as humans first and working with them in terms of, making our services as affordable and accessible as possible, in making sure that our team members are culturally competent to work with a large, diverse population of clients. We want to make sure that scheduling is flexible so people can fit therapy into their lives, and we don't require people to come a certain amount of times or at the same time even every week. We want people to make sure that they're able to have it work and they can be in therapy for as long as they want or for 3 sessions if they want to. And so it's really just about humanizing the healthcare and mental health care experience. Because that's something, I will spare you my massive hours long rant, but that is something that doesn't happen a lot, especially in the US healthcare system. And so that is our goal, is to really make sure that that's the experience clients get with us. We originally started in New York City, where both Jor-El and I live, but now have locations in Philadelphia and San Diego. And so then we can see clients throughout the state of California and Pennsylvania. And so we're just super excited to be able to directly work with more people. We have a blog, a podcast, free resources on our website for anyone who can't see us. And so kind of all of this idea of just making mental health more accessible and more humanized.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And you mentioned there about your own chronic illness. You have done 4 marathons despite of that. So maybe if you could tell us, if you want to share whatever is comfortable about, how that has affected your running and your life, and how you kind of have made peace with it.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I actually originally started running because I was in I managed a chronic illness for like 2 decades, but I was only recently diagnosed in the past little over a year now. And so that's something that, I was told by one of the many doctors, multiple of the many doctors I had seen leading up to that point, that I shouldn't run. It was bad. It would be devastating, all of these things. But I was in a pretty dark place, just pain-wise with symptoms anyway. And I was kind of just like, well, what do I have to lose, right? My mom is also a runner, and I'd see her complete races. And as you mentioned, I was in martial arts forever. And so like athletics and sport and movement was always an important part of my life. And I was kind of in a space where that wasn't really present. And so I decided I'm going to run a half marathon. And it was just the best decision I've ever made. And I have obviously continued running. It was supposed to be one and done, and it was not. Spoiler. But I also just really credit running to saving my life, because I think it's what got me diagnosed. In some ways, movement for my condition, I am diagnosed with spondyloarthritis. And one of the things that they always recommend is movement. So I think in some ways, like, it's kept me healthier than I might have been otherwise, because moving, stretching, making sure that I was healthy for running as much as possible. But also, running is kind of what made me continue to fight for an answer, because it would impact me while I was running. Some days were better than others, obviously. And it's what continuously made me want to say, like, no, this isn't okay to just not know what's going on or to not have an answer. I want to be able to do this thing that I love. I want to be able to move and be active in the way I want to. And so I continued to push. And it was actually through another running podcast where one of the hosts described what she was going through. And I was like, that sounds super familiar, and led me to see a rheumatologist and led me to a diagnosis. And so I'm always just really grateful for that I think it just gave me a reason to continue to push for something better. Mm-hmm. And in addition to, I see it kind of as an act of defiance. Whenever I finish a race, especially a longer one, half marathon, marathon, I'm just so grateful that I get to do this. And it's like, okay, today I won over illness. And, some days I don't, but in that day I won, and I'm still able to do this, and just always incredibly grateful for finish lines for that reason.
So then with chronic illnesses, there's many listeners, I'm sure, who are working through that as well. You mentioned about kind of winning over it. What would be your best advice for the mental side of never really knowing whether there's going to be a good or a bad day, and kind of accepting the fact that it could kind of hit you at any point, and whether running or not, and that's kind of always kind of peering over your shoulder?
Yeah. If anyone has any tips, I'm also welcome to hearing them. Just kidding. Not really though. But yeah, I think one of the biggest things is just the whole idea of feeling your feelings again, and just accepting that sometimes there are moments of triumph. Like I ran a half marathon or a 5K or walked down the block despite the fact that I'd manage all of this and I'm not supposed to. And then there are other days where it just really sucks. And that doesn't go away. I think there's a lot of inspirational stories out there about like, I dealt with this and now everything's fine and I overcame it. Yeah, my experience has been that is not chronic illness. There are days where you feel like that, and there are days where it just sucks and you don't want to get out of bed and you are just angry and crying all day. And that's what you live with until someone either comes up with a cure, or hopefully after a very long life that you've lived. And so accepting of that's going to be the reality, and advice that I am still also working on taking is to just listen to what you need, and that breaks do not mean you're done forever. And I think sometimes that's hard because it becomes almost like a panic of like, oh, I can't, run, for example, this day because I'm having a flare or my body's just not cooperating. Remembering that is that day. And it could be better a week from now. It doesn't mean that you have to continue to push through even when you shouldn't, because if you don't, it'll be taken away from you. And I think that's something that's challenging to live with, but remembering that and having a support system that can remind you of that is incredibly helpful, because sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees when it's you and you're in it. And so having that support system of people who will really support everything you need, but especially who will support you in those times where you need to be reminded, like, you need to just do what you need to do for now and it'll get better, especially if you've been in a place where it's gotten better. Chronic illness is often cycling. And so you'll come out of it and it'll be okay. And you'll continue with whatever you want to do. It's almost this idea of like reminding you that like there is a tomorrow, even though that sounds kind of dramatic.
It's kind of sounds also like what we were talking about earlier, right? That it's okay, maybe with running or whatever it is that is causing that extra stress in your life, you take a break from it, and maybe in running that can just be backing off and doing, like you said, 5 miles, 3 miles, whatever, a day or a few times a week. But reminding us, that things aren't so permanent as they seem. And I think with running, it can often feel that way. That, okay, well, I guess this is the end. Right. I guess this is the day that I'll remember as the beginning of the end. But you never really know what 5 years down the road will hold. And the beautiful thing about running is that we can go back to it. But also other things in our lives that maybe we don't have a place for right in this moment, but doesn't mean we won't in the future.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things that my own therapist said to me kind of in relation to this idea of like managing chronic illness, and because I'm somebody who I don't enjoy rest, like I know I need it as a person, but I've never been the kind of person who like enjoys a day watching movies all day. Like it's just not my personality. And so it's been a struggle to kind of say like, oh, not only is this what my body needs, but also I don't like it. So even though I need it, like I don't want to. So you're kind of fighting two forces but she says to me, you can do X, but should you? And I think that's really been helpful in kind of reframing this idea of like, I could push myself and schedule, 5 back-to-back work meetings and then go out later that night and then do a long run the next day. Like I'm capable. I'm someone who will push through it, but should I? Is that what's best in the long game, right? And kind of zooming out to just pass that day and saying you could, but is this what's really going to benefit you and bring you what you want overall? And I think that's helpful both like in chronic illness and also just life, kind of burnout, however you're experiencing it, is like you could do a lot, but should you? Like, is that actually beneficial to you and what you want and need past like this second?
Yeah, so true. Actually, yesterday I was on a long run with a friend, and it was the first time. I have a new friend who lives near me, and we've been running together a few days a week, and it's been amazing. And so having someone, like I was intending on doing 2 hours, and at the 1.5 hour mark, I just felt so bad. I felt so bad. So I was like, okay, can we swing by my house and I'll grab a glass of water and see if that helps. And I did have water with me, but I'd run out at this point. And so I went in and I had a glass of water, and then we got back again. And then 10 minutes later, I was like, it might have been 5 minutes later. I was like, I just, something feels wrong. Like I know I can finish this 2 hours, but I just feel nauseous and just horrible. Like something feels off. And so we just turned around and came straight back to my house. And for me, that was a big moment where I was like, wow, I actually, even though it only ended up cutting off like 8 minutes, it was still a step to where I was like, I could finish and make it to 2 hours and say I pushed through when I was feeling bad. But I also, sometimes it can be good to feel proud of yourself for being like, okay, does this really need to be a push through day when I just don't feel like it's the right kind of time to do it?
Right. It's the why, like you said, you got pretty good amount of running in. Like what is the difference between where you stopped in those extra 8 minutes? Like probably nothing. Yeah. If you really think about it. Right. And if you're in a place where you're like, I just do not want to do this, why would you? Right. Yeah. Like, why would you continue to suffer? Because especially, pushing through what might be illness or just lack of sleep or just a bad day might set you up for a really bad day tomorrow or the 2 days later, right? It's just this idea of kind of zooming out and saying like, does this actually matter? And if it does, there are days where you say like, I'm just being whiny or whatever it is, or I need to like kick my own ass. And we all have days like that. But that is also very different than I am not feeling well, whatever that means physically, mentally, and I need a break, or I need to stop doing this, or I don't want to. And those are two very different things. And just checking in with yourself and constantly kind of doing that self-reflection and not ignoring what your body and your mind are telling you, allow you to differentiate between those two. And then you can make the right decision, and you can push when you need to, and you can stop when you need to.
Yeah, so true. Thank you. One final question to wrap up here. You mentioned in the bios about you and Jor-El that we've already said he's this kind of very calming influence, and you are the type A, which most of us listening are. I'm really curious about this nowadays. Do you think type A, being a type A person, that perfectionist, does that ever really serve us? Like, I struggle with, yes, I think in many ways it helps us to accomplish great things. But what are your thoughts on that?
Pros and cons to everything. I think there is kind of like I don't want to call it a double-edged sword, but I guess maybe that's a good way to put it. I think there are ways it does and ways it doesn't. And it's about recognizing when it's helpful and when it's not. When I need to get work done or start a business, it was super helpful. At mile 18 of a marathon, works great. Going kind of with the healthcare, when I need to incessantly call insurance companies to make sure I get my medication, it works excellently.
Yeah.
However, when I am up at night stressing over something that actually isn't that important, no. I'll actually tell a story that was between Jor-El and I, which I thought was just like, I use this a lot actually. So I had been texting him about dinner plans, and I sent this very long text about the difference. Like, we could have a 7:15 reservation or a 7:30 reservation, and here's why this would be better than this one or this one. And he's just like this, and he was just like, it doesn't. And we had a conversation earlier about like how I focus on things that don't necessarily matter. And I was like, I don't know what you mean. And then that text happened, and then he goes, this is what I'm talking about. Like, it doesn't, like, this is not important. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, things like that, where I'll work myself up to this frenzy where it's like, this doesn't matter. And, luckily Jarrell is very much the opposite of my like 7:15 or 7:30. Which should I choose? And my husband is also very much the opposite of that. So I think like having those checks and balances are helpful, and like reminding me, okay, like this being on all the time is not helpful, but at the same time, I'll use like my husband as an example. And if he listens to this, sorry that I'm calling him out, but if it were up to him, like nothing would get done in a timely manner. Like, he picked up our dog's prescription like a week after I told him it was ready because I was away, and he just forgot. Right. And so it's kind of this balance of that. Sometimes it's helpful and sometimes it's not. Yeah. And that goes back to self-reflection of kind of knowing when to check yourself and when to maybe turn it off. Because there are times I want to be like super adamant type A person. And there are times where I need to be able to pause and say like, this isn't helpful right now. You need to let this go. Yes. So it's both a blessing and a curse, but I also think that's true of everything. And so, like I said, it's kind of knowing that balance and knowing when to turn it on and turn it off.
Thank you so much for sharing that, and a very interesting answer, which definitely makes sense when I think about it. Is there anything else you'd like to remind everyone listening? I will put links in the show notes to Viva, but anything else you'd like to remind people listening based on what we've talked about today?
Listen to what you need. There's no right way to do running, to do life, and if it doesn't feel good, it's okay to stop. And more importantly than anything else, especially as it relates to running, like, running is supposed to be fun. I think people, especially runners, often forget that like things like that are supposed to be fun. And if it's not fun, what's going on? So true.
Thank you so much. Rachel, I will put links to everything in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today, for your wisdom and insights and your vulnerability and sharing your own journey too. We appreciate you, and wishing you lots of luck in New York. That's so exciting.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It was great to be here.
The Running for Real podcast and everything we do here at Running for Real would not be possible if it wasn't for the Running for Real team. While I am the person who you hear from most often and maybe the face of the brand, the rest of our team are such critical pieces of what we do. And without them, I think I'd just be running around in circles with ideas. So I want to take a moment to thank our team. To Jeremy Nessel, who's been with me since the very beginning. Kat McKay, Sally Pontarelli, Kelsey Wang, Sandy Gutierrez, Louise Murphy, Andrew Basola, Alexandria Will, and Maria Vargas. Thank you to each and every one of you for all that you give to Running for Real and our community. I appreciate you, and I'm so thankful for having you as a part of the team. So thankful to Rachel for her vulnerability shared there to show us that even though she is a therapist, it doesn't mean she doesn't struggle with things too. I find that always really comforting to know that people who are professionals in that way struggle with things too. I also really appreciated that conversation on burnout. It was one that was long overdue, and I'm really glad we had the opportunity to have it together with her. You can go check out Viva Health but through the links in the show notes, as well as where you can find more about Rachel. And I want to encourage you to go check out Patreon. Go sign up for those special bonuses that you are going to get through joining each month. There is a lot going on over there. There's going to be a lot of conversations. You're going to have a lot of direct access to me, Zoom calls with me, and I would love to see you over there. So go to running for real. And there's also a link for you in the show notes to go get it. I also want to thank our sponsors for today, Tracksmith. Go check out those shoes, the Elliott Runner. You can go to tracksmith.com/Tina to go check those out. And to Athletic Greens, you can get a 1-year free supply of vitamin D3 and K2, which we need going into the winter months here. go to plus 5 free travel packs. When you go to athleticgreens.com/Tina, you will see why I love this product so much. As soon as you go there, as soon as you get yourself some, you will get it almost immediately. Thank you so much for listening, my friends. I will see you next week.